A trembling hand grips a claymore detonator in the pre-dawn darkness of a Vietnamese rubber plantation. The year is 1968. The man holding it is 25 years old, raised in a mining town in Western Australia, and he is about to kill 18 men in 20 seconds. His name is Frank Cashmore. He's terrified. His stomach is in knots. His pulse is racing. But when that column of Viet Cong soldiers enters his kill zone, something switches off inside him. The fear disappears, and what replaces it is something far more dangerous: perfect, ruthless discipline. This is the story of the most patient killer in the Australian Special Air Service. A man who turned fear into a weapon, silence into strategy, and waiting into an art form that would claim 23 enemy lives across 2 tours without losing a single man under his command. Frank Cashmore wasn't supposed to be a legend. Born in England in 1942, raised in the coal and timber town of Collie in Western Australia, he was just another kid who joined the army at 17 because mining towns don't offer many futures. The Royal Australian Infantry took him in 1959. He was unremarkable, average build, no special talents, just willing. But something happened to Cashmore in the jungles of Malaya during the emergency. He saw how patience won battles, how silence killed more effectively than bullets, how the soldier who waited longest usually went home alive. By the time he joined the Special Air Service Regiment in 1963 at age 21, he had internalized a philosophy that would define his career. The jungle rewards discipline, not aggression. His will to survive and bring his men home. His fear of losing a patrol member under his command. Absolute commitment to his soldiers, the kind of loyalty that made men follow him into impossible situations. Volcanic anxiety that consumed him before every mission. The emotional turbulence that squadron intelligence officers noted in his file as highly strung, prone to pre-operation stomach trouble and visible nervousness. Most SAS candidates fail selection twice before passing. Cashmore passed on his first attempt, not because he was physically superior, but because he could endure discomfort longer than anyone else. He could wait. He could watch. He could remain absolutely still while his body screamed at him to move. By 1966, he was operating in Borneo during the Indonesian confrontation, running cross-border ambushes that taught him the mathematics of killing, angles, timing, overlapping fields of fire, and the critical understanding that the side that moves first usually loses. When he arrived in Vietnam with 2 SAS Squadron in February 1968, his squadron commander described him as emotional and prone to pre-operation anxiety. His corporal, Danny Wright, saw something else. He saw a man who converted fear into fuel. Wright would later say, Cashmore wasn't calm. He was terrified like all of us. But he converted fear into pure tactical violence. When the claymore detonated, you knew he planned every microsecond. The world Cashmore entered in early 1968 was Phuoc Thai province, a patchwork of rubber plantations, secondary jungle, and villages where the Viet Cong's D445 battalion moved supplies with near impunity. Australian conventional forces could control daylight, but the night belonged to the VC, and the trails between their bases and their forward positions were their highways. The SAS mission was simple in theory, impossible in execution. 5-man patrols inserted deep into enemy territory, sometimes 60 to 100 kilometers from friendly lines, tasked with reconnaissance and ambush. 5 men against an enemy that numbered in the thousands. No backup, no rescue if things went wrong. Radio contact only after dark. Extraction only when the mission was complete or compromise was imminent. The stakes were absolute. Get compromised and you die. Make noise and you die. Move carelessly and you die. The Viet Cong owned this terrain. They knew every trail, every village, every hiding spot. The only advantage the SAS had was invisibility and discipline. The inciting incident came on March 7, 1968, at 0530 hours, when a Huey helicopter dropped Cashmore's 5-man patrol 2 kilometers south of Nui Dat. Their mission: reconnaissance of a VC supply trail running through a rubber plantation northeast of Bahria. Duration: 7 days maximum. Expected contact: minimal. But Cashmore had studied the intelligence. He knew D445 Battalion was preparing for offensive operations. He knew they needed ammunition, rice, weapons. He knew supply columns moved at night. And he knew that if he could find their route, he could kill them. As the helicopter disappeared, and the jungle swallowed his patrol whole. Cashmore looked at his 4 men, Wright, McLeod, Nisbet, Dunn, and gave them the only guidance that mattered. We don't move unless we have to. We watch. We document. And when the time comes, we kill everything in the kill zone. What none of them knew yet was that in 4 days, Cashmore would detonate an ambush so perfectly executed that the Viet Cong would abandon that supply route entirely and start using tractors instead of foot columns. But first, they had to wait. And waiting in the jungle is its own form of hell. Waiting is its own form of violence. Your body cramps. Insects crawl across your skin, and you cannot move to brush them away. You hear every sound, branches snapping, animals moving, distant voices, and each one could be the enemy patrol that discovers you. You urinate where you lie. You eat cold rations in the dark. You do not speak. Hand signals only. And you watch. For 3 days, Cashmore's patrol observed the rubber plantation trail from a position 50 meters off the path, concealed in dense undergrowth. They did not patrol. They did not explore. They simply watched and documented. March 7th, 02:47 hours. VC Porter Column, 8 men, AK-47s slung casually, tires sandals, moving southwest. Estimated load 20 kilograms per man. Rice sacks, ammunition crates. March 7th, 09:05 hours. Different column, 11 men, RPG-7s noted, moving northeast. Opposite direction. That detail was critical. It suggested a supply rotation system, forward positions being resupplied while empty columns returned. March 8th. 2 more columns, same pattern. Predictable timing. Same trail. Minimal security. March 9th. Another 3 columns. The pattern was undeniable now. The Viet Cong had used this trail so many times without incident that they'd become complacent. Scouts walked 50 to 100 meters ahead, but the main body was relaxed, even careless. They talked. They smoked. They moved like men who owned the night. By March 10th, Cashmore had enough data. The enemy moved between 0200 and 0400 hours. Columns ranged from 8 to 20 men. Spacing was 2 meters apart, single file. The trail was predictable. The timing was predictable. Everything about their movement screamed routine. And routine gets you killed. Cashmore selected his ambush site with surgeon precision. A narrow section of trail flanked by rubber trees. Natural canopy overhead providing concealment. Dense vegetation on both sides offering covered withdrawal routes. He positioned his claymore mines, M1801s, each containing 700 steel ball bearings, at 25 meters and 30 meters down the trail, angled for 90-degree enfilade fire. When detonated, the overlapping kill zones would cover 40 meters of trail with 1,400 steel projectiles traveling at 4,000 feet per second. Anything human inside that zone would cease to exist. His men took positions. Cashmore held the detonator. Wright covered McLeod. Nisbet handled reserve ammunition. Dunn secured the rear. Their escape route was marked with small rock cairns invisible to anyone who didn't know to look for them. Then they waited again. The afternoon of March 10th crawled by. Evening came. Darkness fell. The jungle came alive with night sounds. Birds, insects, distant artillery from Australian fire bases miles away. Cashmore lay prone, detonator in hand, eyes fixed on the trail. His finger rested on the trigger. Wright later recalled watching Cashmore during those hours. His jaw was clenched so tight the muscles stood out like cables. Sweat ran down his face despite the cool night air. He was terrified, but he didn't move, didn't speak, just waited. 0300 hours, March 11th. The jungle was perfectly silent except for the distant sound of 105mm batteries firing harassment missions. Cashmore's breathing was controlled. His hand was steady. 0315 hours. Movement on the trail. Footsteps. Whispered voices. Then silence again. False alarm. Scouts probing ahead. Cashmore didn't flinch. Didn't detonate early. Just waited. 0317 hours. The column appeared. Single file. AK-47s. RPG-7 launchers. Ammunition crates. 18 men. Maybe more. They moved with the confidence of soldiers who had walked this trail 100 times before. No one was watching the flanks. No one was scanning the jungle. They were just walking, talking quietly, relaxed. The lead man entered the kill zone. Cashmore waited. The second man entered. Cashmore waited. SAS doctrine was absolute. Do not detonate until the maximum number of targets are inside the overlapping lethal envelopes. Do not fire early. Do not give them a chance to scatter. Compress them into the kill zone and then obliterate everything inside it. The third man, the fourth, the fifth. The column kept coming, a human chain walking directly into the trap. Cashmore's finger tightened on the trigger, but he held. Not yet. Not yet. By 0318 hours, the entire column, all 18 men, was compressed into 40 meters of trail, shoulder to shoulder, packed tight, perfect target density. Cashmore squeezed the trigger. Wright would describe it years later with the flat effect of a man who had relived the moment 10,000 times. The trees seemed to explode. White light, then smoke, then screaming. Not normal screaming. That's what struck me. They didn't have time to process what happened. It was instant chaos, bodies flying, the smell of cordite and blood. We weren't even conscious we were firing, just muzzles flashing, 3-round bursts into pre-designated sectors. The claymores detonated simultaneously. 1,400 steel balls shredded the column at 4,000 feet per second. Men were torn apart, thrown sideways, decapitated by the hydrostatic shock. The ones who survived the initial blast, maybe 4 or 5, had seconds to register what was happening before L-101 rifles opened up. Controlled 3-round bursts. Each patrol member firing into predetermined sectors to ensure complete coverage. No panic. No spray and pray. Just disciplined, mechanical killing. Cashmore fired into the center mass of the column. Wright covered the left flank. McLeod took the right. Nisbet provided suppressive fire on the trail exits. Dunn secured the rear, weapon trained on their escape route in case VC reinforcements approached from behind. 30 seconds of firing. Then silence. The jungle went quiet except for the moaning of wounded men and the crackle of small fires started by the claymore detonations. Smoke hung in the air. The smell of blood and cordite was overwhelming. Cashmore conducted a visual sweep, counting bodies through the haze. 13 confirmed kills. 4 wounded, bleeding profusely, unable to pursue. 2 AK-47s lay in the dirt, still clutched by dead hands. 1 RPG-7 launcher. Ammunition crates split open, spilling thousands of rounds across the trail. 0 SAS casualties. Cashmore didn't celebrate, didn't smile, didn't say a word. He just pointed toward their escape route, and his patrol moved. 200 meters northeast through dense vegetation. Establish secondary ambush position in case of VC pursuit. Monitor enemy movements. Wait for extraction window. 20 minutes later, artillery was called in on the ambush site to discourage any VC attempt to recover bodies or equipment. At 0415 hours, a Huey extracted them under covering fire from 105mm guns. The entire patrol, insertion to extraction, lasted 4 days. 13 confirmed enemy killed. Critical intelligence gathered on VC supply patterns. Mission success by every metric. But something else happened that night. The Viet Cong captured the ambush site afterward and found the claymore fragments, the patrol signs, the precision of the setup. They realized they weren't fighting conventional soldiers. They were fighting ghosts who could wait for days and then kill with industrial efficiency. D445 Battalion rerouted their supply columns to less efficient mountain passes. They started using captured Cambodian tractors to move supplies because foot columns were too vulnerable. Hence the operation's nickname, the tractor ambush. For weeks afterward, VC activity in that sector dropped significantly. They were dispersed, seeking alternative routes, vulnerable to Australian conventional forces. One 5-man patrol with 2 claymore mines had disrupted an entire battalion's logistics. The Australian command recommended Cashmore for the military medal for bravery. The citation was straightforward. In 1968, as a sergeant with 2 SAS Squadron, Sergeant Cashmore was patrol commander of an ambush party which inflicted a large number of casualties on the enemy. But the military medal was never awarded. It was downgraded to a mentioned in dispatches due to quota systems limiting gallantry awards. Too many brave men, not enough medals to go around. Some bureaucrat in an office thousands of miles from the jungle decided Frank Cashmore's ambush, 13 dead enemy, 0 friendly losses, textbook execution, didn't quite make the cut. He received a piece of paper instead of a decoration. Cashmore didn't complain. That wasn't who he was. You did your job. You brought your men home. The medals didn't matter. Except they did. And the jungle wasn't finished with Frank Cashmore yet. By 1971, the war was ending. Australia was withdrawing from Vietnam. The political will was gone. The public was tired. Vietnamization meant American forces were stepping back and the South Vietnamese were supposed to take over. The Australian task force was winding down operations. Most soldiers were counting days until they went home. Frank Cashmore, now a senior sergeant, returned for a second tour not because he wanted to, but because two SAS squadron needed experienced patrol commanders to train the younger soldiers before the withdrawal was complete. He was 30 years old. He had a wife back home. He had done his time. But the Army asked and Cashmore said yes, because that's what sergeants do. His goal by 1971 was to complete the mission and get everyone out alive before the withdrawal. His fear was that younger, less experienced soldiers would die because he wasn't there to lead them. From anxious young sergeant to hardened combat leader, the fear still present, but now channeled into protective mentorship. The strategic situation in 1971 was collapse in slow motion. The People's Army of Vietnam 33rd Regiment, 1,500 men, and the VCD 445 Battalion, 1,200 men, were regrouping in Long Con and Phuoc Thai provinces, preparing for offensive operations to fill the vacuum Australian withdrawal would create. Intelligence indicated major attacks were planned. The SAS mission was to disrupt, delay, and gather intelligence on enemy intentions. Cashmore was assigned command of a 10-man fighting patrol, an unusual formation combining two 5-man reconnaissance teams into a single, more aggressive unit designed for high-value ambush operations. 10 men carried more firepower, could sustain longer engagements, and could tackle larger enemy formations. But 10 men also made more noise, left bigger tracks, and required tighter discipline to avoid compromise. His patrol included seasoned veterans, Corporal Graham Smith, Trooper Felix Richards, Trooper Don Barnby, Trooper Tony Peacock, and a second 5-man element under 2nd Lieutenant Brian Russell. Officially, Russell commanded because officers outranked sergeants. In practice, Cashmore retained tactical control during contact because experience mattered more than rank in the jungle. Their target area was Ho Tram Cape, a coastal region where Long Con Province's inland VC bases connected to D445 Battalion's forward operating base. Intelligence suggested a VC district commander, estimated rank of major or senior captain, would transit this route within 72 hours for a command conference. Capturing or killing a district commander was valuable. Capturing his documents was priceless. Insertion came on June 12, 1971, 0530 hours. The Huey dropped them at Ho Tram Cape landing zone and disappeared. 10 men melted into Kenai grass 50 meters off the main trail and began the wait. For 3 days, Cashmore observed. June 12, 2 VC supply columns, routine traffic. 15 men each, moving northwest. Standard loads. Nothing unusual. June 13th, 1 squad-sized patrol, 8 men, moving southeast. Likely command escort elements probing the route ahead of someone important. June 14th, 0200 hours, jackpot. 12 men moving southeast. 2 armed bodyguards in front, scanning the trail but not the flanks. 1 senior officer. Cashmore could identify rank by posture, by the way the others deferred to him, by the deliberate pace. 2 junior officers walking close behind. 4 porters carrying canvas bags and message pouches. 3 trail security in the rear. This was the target. High-value command element. Perfect for ambush. But 12 men was more firepower than typical 5 to 7-man supply columns. If the ambush failed, if even a few VC escaped and called for reinforcements, Cashmore's 10-man patrol could be surrounded and annihilated. They were operating 70 kilometers from friendly lines. No backup, no rescue. If things went wrong, they would die in that jungle. Conservative doctrine said observe and report. Let conventional forces handle it. Don't take unnecessary risks. Cashmore looked at those canvas bags the porters were carrying. Those likely contained maps, orders, intelligence that could change the tactical picture for the entire Australian task force. Intelligence that could save lives. He ordered ambush setup. His logic was simple. A VC district commander moving with minimal security meant he felt safe. That confidence was a weapon Cashmore could use. And those documents represented an intelligence windfall too valuable to pass up. Between 03:05 and 03:35 hours, Cashmore positioned his patrol with the precision of a man who had done this before. 2 claymores at 20 and 25 meters, angled 60 degrees to create overlapping kill zones across 30 meters of trail. Smith and Kovalev positioned the M60 general-purpose machine gun for overhead suppressive fire. Richards and Pember flanked for anti-escape fire. Russell held a 2-man reserve element 100 meters rear for perimeter security in case the ambush drew VC reinforcements. At 03:42 hours, the VC command element entered the kill zone in single file. Cashmore waited until all 12 targets were compressed into the 30-meter envelope. Maximum lethality, minimum escape probability. Then he detonated both claymores simultaneously. 1,400 steel balls struck the column at supersonic velocity. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. Estimated 8 to 9 VC killed in the first half-second. The senior officer, later identified as Deputy Commander Le Van Hong of D445 Battalion, took fragmentation to the torso and went down hard, still clutching a canvas message pouch. For 5 seconds there was chaos. Bodies falling, screaming, blood mist hanging in the air. For the next 15 seconds there was controlled violence. L101 rifles opened full automatic, 3-round bursts per trigger pull. Every man had a sector, 3 rounds per squeeze. Suppress and suppress. The noise was total. Individual shots indistinguishable. Just continuous roar of overlapping fire designed to eliminate any survivors and prevent return fire. At 30 seconds, Cashmore ordered ceasefire. Damage assessment: 10 confirmed enemy killed, 2 wounded but mobile, fleeing into the jungle. And there, 15 meters into the kill zone, Deputy Commander Le Van Hong, dead, still clutching that canvas message pouch. This is where Cashmore made the decision that would define his legacy. SAS doctrine said withdraw immediately. Do not enter the kill zone. Do not expose yourself. The enemy is wounded, disoriented, but reinforcements will come. Get out while you still can. Cashmore ignored doctrine. He moved forward into the kill zone, alone, weapon up, scanning for survivors, and retrieved the message pouch from the dead VC commander's hand. 15 meters of exposed ground. Bodies everywhere. Blood. Smoke. The smell of death. And Cashmore walked into it like he was collecting mail. Trooper Kevin Richards later said, "We thought he'd lost his mind." But he hadn't. He knew exactly what he was doing. Those documents were worth the risk. The pouch contained hand-drawn maps showing D445 Battalion assembly areas. Operational orders for planned offensive operations. Unit strength returns listing exactly 1,200 men. Supply route diagrams showing 8 primary routes and 3 emergency alternatives. Everything the Australian task force needed to preempt the VC offensive. Cashmore grabbed the pouch and withdrew. The patrol moved 200 meters perpendicular to the trail, established a secondary position in tall Kenai grass, and waited for extraction. Enemy reinforcements converged on the ambush site, voices shouting, weapons firing blindly into the jungle. But Cashmore's patrol remained invisible. At 0450 hours, a Huey extracted them under sporadic small arms fire. 0 SAS casualties. 10 enemy killed. 1 VC district commander's intelligence captured intact. The documents went to 1st Australian Task Force Intelligence for immediate analysis. What they revealed changed everything. D445 Battalion's exact strength, 1,200 men, down from a peak of 2,000 due to previous casualties. 8 primary supply routes and 3 emergency routes that conventional intelligence hadn't identified. A 3-month offensive campaign targeting Australian withdrawal operations with specific attack dates and objectives. The names and positions of 6 senior officers who could now be targeted. Between June 15th and June 17th, Australian and South Vietnamese forces used those maps to assault D445's assembly area directly. 47 VC killed. 3 command posts destroyed. Between June 18th and 22nd, airstrikes demolished 3 major supply caches identified from Cashmore's maps. Thousands of rounds of ammunition, rice stockpiles, medical supplies, all gone. By June 25th, D445 Battalion abandoned Long Con province entirely and withdrew to Cambodia to regroup. The planned offensive never materialized. Australian withdrawal operations proceeded without the major attacks intelligence had predicted. 1 ambush. 10 enemy killed. But more importantly, Cashmore's decision to personally enter that kill zone and recover those documents had disrupted an entire enemy offensive campaign. His squadron commander, Major John Murphy, later said, Cashmore's decision to take that VC commander's documents changed everything. We went from reactive patrols to offensive operations with intelligence-driven precision. We went from blind to seeing. The Australian command recommended Cashmore for the military medal again. The citation was clear. In 1971, again as a sergeant with 2 SAS Squadron, Sergeant Cashmore was patrol commander of a 10-man ambush team, which inflicted a large number of casualties on the enemy. In addition, vital documents and maps were recovered from a dead enemy commander. And again, the military medal was downgraded to mentioned in dispatches due to quota restrictions. 2 tours, 2 major ambushes, 23 enemy killed, 0 SAS losses. 2 of the most effective small unit operations in Australian military history. 2 pieces of paper instead of proper recognition. Frank Cashmore returned to Australia in October 1971 with 2 mentioned in dispatches citations, the knowledge that he had done everything right, and the bitter understanding that the system didn't care. He didn't complain. He didn't protest. That wasn't who sergeants were. You did your job. You brought your men home. You lived with it. From anxious young soldier to legendary patrol commander, the fear never gone but mastered, weaponized, converted into the patience and discipline that kept everyone alive. But the story doesn't end there. For 28 years, Frank Cashmore lived as a forgotten soldier. No one outside the SAS remembered the tractor ambush. No one remembered the VC commander whose documents reshaped Australian operations in Long Con. The operations were classified. The patrol reports were buried in archives. The men who served with him knew what he'd done, but the public didn't. The government didn't. History didn't. And Cashmore went on with his life, carrying the weight of what he had done in silence. He worked. He raised a family. He attended veteran reunions and drank with the men who'd been there, the only people who understood. He didn't talk about Vietnam with outsiders. What was there to say? Who would believe that 5 men could wait in the jungle for 3 days and then kill 13 people in 30 seconds? Who would understand what it meant to walk into a kill zone full of bodies to retrieve a canvas pouch? The medals didn't matter, he told himself. You did your job. That's enough. Except it wasn't enough. Because the medals did matter. Not for him, for what they represented. They were the nation's acknowledgement that what you did was extraordinary, that your courage and sacrifice were seen and valued, that you weren't forgotten. Frank Cashmore had been forgotten. But in 1999, something changed. The Australian Defence Force conducted a systematic review of Vietnam War Gallantry Awards. The purpose was to identify cases where quota systems, artificial limits on how many medals could be awarded in any given year, had downgraded deserving recommendations. It was an admission that the system had failed, that brave men had been denied recognition not because they weren't worthy, but because some bureaucrat had decided there were too many heroes and not enough medals to go around. 21 soldiers were ultimately identified for upgrade from mentioned in dispatches or lesser awards to proper gallantry decorations. Frank Cashmore's file was one of them. The review board examined his service record, read the patrol reports, interviewed veterans who'd served with him, analyzed the tactical decisions, the outcomes, the strategic impact. Their assessment. In 1968, Sergeant Cashmore demonstrated exceptional initiative and courage under fire, commanding an ambush that inflicted 13 enemy casualties with 0 friendly losses, disrupting enemy logistics for weeks afterward. In 1971, Sergeant Cashmore demonstrated exceptional initiative and leadership of a 10-man fighting patrol, made a deliberate tactical choice to personally enter a kill zone under fire to recover critical intelligence documents, and enabled Australian task force operations that prevented a major enemy offensive. Both actions met or exceeded the threshold for the Medal for Gallantry, Australia's 3rd highest military decoration for acts of gallantry in action in hazardous circumstances. On December 1, 1999, 31 years after the tractor ambush and 28 years after the VC Commander operation, Frank Cashmore was awarded the Medal for Gallantry. The medal arrived in the mail. No ceremony. No public announcement. just a box with a ribbon and a piece of metal and a citation explaining what it was for. Cashmore was 57 years old by then. Most of his patrol members were scattered across Australia, living quiet lives, trying to forget the jungle. Some were dead. Danny Wright had died in a car accident in the 80s. Others had succumbed to cancer, heart disease, the long, slow aftermath of war. But the ones who were still alive heard the news. And they called him. And they said what needed to be said. It was about time. You deserved it 30 years ago. We knew. We always knew. Cashmore didn't say much in response. That wasn't his way. But he kept the medal. And he wore it to veteran events. And when younger soldiers asked him about it, he would tell them the story. Not to glorify what he'd done, but to teach them what he'd learned. Patience is a weapon. Discipline is survival. Fear is natural, but you can't let it control you. Convert it to focus. Use it to stay sharp. And when the moment comes, when you have to make the hard decision, you make it and you live with the consequences. That's what being a soldier means. In a 1998 interview, a year before the medal was awarded, Cashmore was asked if he was scared during those operations. He said, "Of course, every patrol is terrifying, but fear isn't weakness if you convert it to focus. We were outnumbered always, 4 men against 50, 10 men against unknown odds. Didn't matter, because we had intelligence, discipline, and claymores. And we went home." When asked if he thought he deserved the military medal that had been downgraded twice, he paused for a long time before answering. "I did my job. That's all. My men went home. That was the mission. The rest is just paperwork." But you could hear it in his voice. The bitterness. The sense that something had been taken from him that couldn't be given back. Recognition delayed is recognition denied. You can't give a man his youth back. You can't give him back the 30 years he spent wondering if what he did mattered. The medal for gallantry didn't erase that. But it was something. An acknowledgement. A correction of the record. A statement that Frank Cashmore had not been forgotten after all. He died in 2009 at age 67. Heart failure. The kind of death that comes quietly, without drama, the opposite of how he'd lived in the jungle. His funeral was attended by SAS veterans, men who'd served in Vietnam and Iraq and Afghanistan, men who'd never met him but knew his name because his operations were still taught in training. The tractor ambush. The VC commander operation. Case studies in patience and discipline and the mathematics of small unit tactics. From forgotten soldier to legend, his legacy preserved not in medals, but in the doctrine and stories passed down through generations of SAS operators who learned that patience is a weapon and discipline is survival. One of the pallbearers was Corporal Graham Smith, who'd been with him during the 1971 operation. Smith later said, "Cashmore taught us that the hardest thing in combat isn't pulling the trigger. It's waiting for the right moment to pull the trigger. Any idiot can start a fight. It takes discipline to start a fight you know you'll win." That was Frank Cashmore's legacy. Not the 23 enemy killed. Not the 0 friendly losses. Not even the medal for gallantry that came 3 decades too late. His legacy was the lesson that fear can be controlled, that patience is more lethal than aggression, and that a man with absolute discipline can accomplish the impossible. The Australian SAS still trains on his operations today. The tractor ambush is studied for its reconnaissance discipline and patience. The VC commander operation is studied for bold leadership and intelligence exploitation. Young soldiers learn Cashmore's name before they deploy. They learn his philosophy. And some of them, the best of them, internalize it the way Cashmore did in Malaya half a century ago. The jungle rewards discipline, not aggression. Wait for the right moment. Convert fear to focus. And when you pull the trigger, make sure everything in the kill zone dies. That's what elite warfare looks like. That's what Frank Cashmore understood better than almost anyone who ever wore the winged dagger. And that's why his story matters. Not because he was fearless, but because he was terrified and did it anyway. Not because he was superhuman, but because he was disciplined enough to seem superhuman. Not because the medals came easy, but because he did the work even when the medals never came at all. Frank Cashmore, Sergeant, 2 SAS Squadron, 2 tours Vietnam, 23 confirmed enemy killed, 0 losses. Patrol Commander, Teacher, Legend, the Phantom of Phuoc Thai.